Welcome to Genuine Humans, exploring the stories behind the great marketing leaders of our time and hearing how their journeys have influenced the brands they've built. Brought to you by The Social Element, here are our hosts, Tamara Littleton, CEO and founder, and Wendy Christie, Chief People Officer.
Welcome back to Genuine Humans podcast, and I'm of course joined by the fabulous Wendy Christie. Hi Wendy, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm all good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm keen to get on because we have got Tom Wallis from Gusto. And Gusto, I'm a bit of a fan of actually, because I would say that Gusto was a bit of a saviour for me during lockdown and bringing a bit of excitement. So I'm particularly happy that Tom has been able to join us today. Welcome, Tom. It's lovely to have you.
Thank you. And it's lovely to speak to you too.
Wonderful. So, Tom, I'm just going to ask, I want to know how you got into marketing. You're the CMO of Gusto. Tell us a little bit about your sort of early career and how you got to where you are now.
I probably took a bit of a roundabout, non-traditional route and probably did it a bit slower than I might otherwise have done when I look back. So I actually studied engineering. So I grew up reading, programming computers and getting really into that sort of stuff and loved it actually. And then when I left university, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I got into consulting, just kind of because it was there and it was easy to apply for, and they come to universities and encourage you. So I just went, okay, I'll just drift along and do that. I was good at it. I learned a lot through that, got lots of really kind of intense instruction in how to organize your time, how to interact with clients, run meetings. And it was a really great grounding in business, I suppose, but nothing to do with marketing at all. And I did that for 5 years and I left in 2008 without another job, actually. I just kind of thought I've had enough of this and thought I'll just take a risk and just quit and look for something else, thinking it would be easy. It wasn't easy to find something else. And through a friend who worked at Sky, he said, oh, we've got sort of some project management stuff going on here. I think you could probably do that. So I went and applied for that and luckily got it. And when I was at Sky, we were in this other building, which was sort of across the road from the marketing team. And it was literally a lot more exciting looking over in that building where all the campaigns were happening and all the drama and all the good stuff. And I thought, I think I'd like to be over there really, because that's where the magic is. And my strategy was pretty rubbish at doing that, which was to try and do a good job in what I was doing and hope that someone would notice at some point and invite me over. 2 years passed before that happened. Complete waste of time. I should have just gone over there, knocked on the door one day. But I did do a good job. I worked in various marketing style projects, supporting the marketing teams and observing, I suppose, how it all worked. And the first job I got in marketing was what at the time was a brand new type of role called sales performance manager. And I was, along with one other person, responsible for understanding the performance of all the different channels that they had. So, marketing channels, so, online, direct, face-to-face, all that sort of stuff. And in that, it was a great introduction, really, because I could observe and understand and listen and meet all the different people who were working on those channels. And over the course of 2 years, kind of be almost through osmosis, absorb all of the different tactics and techniques and understand what worked, what type of sales promotions worked, why certain adverts worked, and see that every day in the numbers. And being from a maths background, looking at it through the numbers was really, really interesting. And after about 2 years of doing this, Now TV started at Sky, and Now TV is at the time was a little startup on the side of Sky. It had no customers. It was there to sort of compete with Netflix and Love Film at the time, and they were looking for people to join it. And I applied for a role, a completely kind of random role. It was affiliates and partnerships manager. I'd never done affiliates, I'd never done partnerships, but it was for a person who I had sort of interacted with in my role as sales performance controller. And I thought that, he knows me and maybe he'll give me a shot. And he interviewed me. And about 2 months passed and I didn't hear back. It was an internal role, so I still wasn't hearing back. I didn't hear back. 2 months. And then 2 months later, he rang me when I was on holiday and said, I can't find anyone else, so it's going to have to be you.
Oh, that's great.
What a great start.
So I thought, oh, great. Okay, right. So let's give it a go. And I went over there. So I'm, literally nothing. It was really scrappy, completely different culture to Sky. They said, right, we think we can grow early on with partnerships, doing deals and affiliates. I don't think you're very good at that, Tom, but give it a go. But one thing that you are good at, you're good at the trading and the sales stuff. So you keep that going, because I know you've been doing that at Sky for a couple of years. But at the same time, see if you can, as well as forecast and sort of do the planning. Let's see if you can actually run these channels, so affiliates and partnerships. And it was pretty scary because I'm, at the time I wasn't particularly outgoing. I wasn't a salesperson in the sense of going out and doing deals, which is what partnerships was. And I was asked to go up to Burton-upon-Trent, where Molson Coors brewery is, to try and do a partnership deal to get the Now TV pass onto kind of 4 million cases of Carling. And I didn't think I could do it, really. So I've never been and sort of tried to negotiate in that way. And my boss at the time said, I don't think you can do it either. But what's interesting is he wasn't that encouraging, but I like that. I don't need praise. I don't need, lots of encouragement. I like it when someone says I can't do something, because it makes me try harder in a way. I'm a bit of a strange response to kind of management and leadership on my part. But I loved that challenge, really. And I went up there and I sat down across a massive kind of wooden table from the brand director there, and somehow made this deal happen. And that was a huge boost of confidence for me. I said, it's working. I did another deal with Microsoft, and to get us on the Xbox or to get a certain kind of promotion on Xbox. And this was sort of 6 months into Now TV. Things weren't really growing as we'd hoped. It wasn't going that well. We weren't seeing the sort of growth that we needed for the amount of money we were spending. And I did this deal. And in the office that we had there were screens around with, charts showing sales in real time, hour by hour. And they'd been pretty flat for the last kind of few weeks and months. And I did this deal, and it was going to go live at 2 p.m. that afternoon. And it was so scrappy that I personally literally put it on the homepage myself, went in and edited the HTML, not even in a sort of test environment, just directly on the live environment, checking that I'd made sure I'd closed all the brackets and put all the dots in the right place. It went live and it went through the roof. It took off, and we saw, I remember the moment of us looking around and people stopping, engineers and so on, sort of stopping up and going, hang on, this is different. And we saw, hundreds and hundreds of sales happening hour by hour. And I thought, well, I did that.
That's amazing.
That was my work. And from seeing, the whole team at the time of sort of 60, 70 people had the last few months of, well, we were told this was not really going to fly, this new proposition from Sky, to seeing everyone go, hang on, this could work now. And to think that it was my actions that did that, not only kind of lifted the company into a sort of period of success, but also inspired everybody else to think, okay, this could work, was an amazing feeling. Mm-hmm. And I remember it because it turned things around for me in a way of saying, well, you can do these kind of things. And from that point on, it was more and more new stuff for me, more and more new experiences in terms of marketing. So I got really into reading because I knew that I didn't have the background in it. I thought, well, I need to have the credibility, I suppose, to understand how all these things work. So I literally read textbooks that are meant for taking to university and marketing courses. I read them cover to cover. So I knew all the background of everything and how it worked, what the theory was. I took on retail and launched the Now TV box into Currys and Argos and John Lewis, and was driving around the country talking to category buyers. No experience in that, but it worked. They said, oh, this is working. Okay, we're growing again. Tom, can you do PPC? Okay, I'll read about how that works and then try and hire somebody and get it going. And it worked. And I was okay, do all of digital marketing. It's working. Keep growing affiliates. Do more of this. And so, yeah, from nothing to all the channels in the space of a couple of years was amazing. And on top of that, took on brand planning. So at the same time as, having that background in data and sales and maths, I suppose, I was asked to do media planning. So not brand planning, media planning for the business. And that was a great way of working out how the money that we're spending in brand advertising correlated with the sales that we were doing in performance as well. And that started a really big journey into learning about sort of both sides of that coin. So that, I suppose, was my entry into marketing. So a bit later than I would have hoped, but I look back and think I can't see it happening any other way. That's just how I was at the time.
It's so self-driven, though. It's almost like you put yourself through an MBA while you were sort of just working through it, really, just absorbing all of this information.
Yeah. I'm a big self-learner, actually. I always loved to self-study, and I taught myself to code when I was a kid, taught myself electronics, taught myself most things. And so I really enjoy learning, and I really enjoyed reading. I just love the technical aspect of marketing in a way, and all the study. I recommend that to anyone is to read all the almost history books on how it all works.
And do you still find that you're being driven more if someone says you can't do that? Is that still with you, that kind of...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic.
I don't know why that is. But...
And so you joined Gusto, was it about 5 years ago?
Yeah, 5.5 years ago, 2016.
Was that a kind of a natural... I mean, obviously there's the subscription thing, but a different category. Did it mean that you were sort of back to the studying again of like how you could do this differently? To tell me about the sort of the plan when you joined Gusto.
Interestingly, I suppose it was serendipitous in a way, because I had finished at Now TV. I think, like many sort of companies, I was there for 5 years, 4 or 5 years. You get to a stage where it enters a new phase, a new arc, and the people like me that were there at the beginning, we've done everything that we can, I suppose. I'd seen it grow from nothing to 1 million customers, and it was a great journey, and I enjoyed the startup nature of it. But as time goes on, it becomes part of Sky, and I wanted to work in something that was more self-contained, where you could really see the impact of it, as it stood alone. I left and I went to OVO Energy for a short period, and that's the first time I've done something which didn't work out really. And I look back on it and I think, well, it's good that I did that, because I don't often take risks that don't work. So I look back at it with really kind of sort of fondly in a way, because and when I'm interviewing people and they come to me a bit shy saying, well, I went to this company and it didn't work out, I say, don't be shy about it. I think that's probably better that you've been to companies that didn't work out. So I went there. It wasn't quite what I expected. I was a little bit bored, actually. And from the sort of roller coaster of Now TV to going to somewhere where I wasn't really being stretched, I thought, well, on the one hand, it's quite nice that getting paid money to not really have to worry about too much. So I thought, hang on, I'm going to stagnate very quickly. Yeah. So I need to stop this. So yeah, after a couple of months, I said it's not really for me. And Gusto at the time was maybe 80 people or something, and they actually advertised on Indeed or LinkedIn or something. No headhunters or anything, just advertised CMO. And I applied in the old-fashioned way with a CV, and I thought, hang on, it's pretty similar to what we've been through at Now TV. Mm-hmm. This could be exactly what I'm looking for. So this could be a sort of semi-subscription type company, similar marketing channels, similar approach to promotions, bit of a similar marketing culture to Sky, because one of the directors at the time was like the ex-Sky MD from many years ago. So I got there and looked around in the interview process and sort of saw how they were approaching. Hang on, this is pretty familiar. I think I can pick this up and run with it. So yeah, I applied, did a couple of interviews, met the founder, CEO, really got on with him, got on with everyone on the team. Thought, hang on, these are my kind of people, actually. Very kind of curious and humble, and joined and thought, okay, I've seen this story before. I've seen this journey before. I think that the things that I've learned I can apply here, but with the benefit of having done them for 5 years and do it again in a similar way. And fortunately, that's kind of what happened. So yeah, it was really taking those learnings and lessons from my time at Now TV and saying, how can I really bring them to a new business?
Fantastic. And I'm going to bet that they love your obsession with data as well.
Yeah. It's an extremely data-driven business at Gusto. And one of the things that I observed when I joined was how that had been put in place from day one.
Right.
So there was a database that was accessible to, still is actually accessible to everybody in the company that's got all of the data about what's going on. So if you want to know how many carrots were in the recipes last week, or what sales promotion we ran 3 years ago, or what marketing channel drove the spike in April 2020, all that stuff is at your fingertips, at anyone's fingertips. So the marketing team at the time were all, relatively green, inexperienced as you'd expect in a startup, but they had all the data in front of them. They were so kind of hungry and curious. They could just experiment, every day, and running experiments is the lifeblood of it. So, hugely data driven, and I was able to again bring that to a new level when I joined.
Yeah, so what might seem like a really unusual sort of path into to marketing, and actually, I think we're learning there's no such thing as a usual path. That background in computing and the love of numbers and all of that has really paved the way. I wanted to sort of pick at those threads a little bit. You mentioned that you were really into computers when you were little. How early did that start, and what was it that triggered that passion?
I think I was born at the sort of exact moment that the personal computer started to enter people's homes. So I think I was about 4.
Wow.
Maybe. I feel as though I learnt to code about the same time I learnt to talk, practically, or in the same kind of period. So, we got an Acorn Electron. Maybe some people remember those, which was like the sort of little brother to the BBC Micro. We bought it in Sainsbury's. You could buy them in Sainsbury's. I can still picture it. It was in a box on the gondola end. It was about £100 or something, which was a lot back then. And I just pored over it. I sat down. My parents bought me magazines where you would retype the code listings into the thing, just literally just typing it back in, because you didn't have cover disks that early on, and just obsessed by it. Learned assembly language, all that sort of stuff, and I just loved the fact that you could create anything. I loved inventing things. Like when I was in primary school, me and my best friend at the time would say, "Oh, let's be inventors when we grow up." I loved, the mental aspect of thinking of what machines might look like, what things that we could do with them, and when learning how to code, realizing that you can kind of create that stuff in a way. It was obviously very small and at the time just really kind of basic, but yeah, it was fascinating.
I think it really triggers something, actually, because I know that I'm sort of a bit similar in that way, that I used to buy the magazines of how to code, and I had a ZX81 that I sent off for like a special keyboard that was like a rubberized one, and I was just doing that thing where it would just be snowflakes on the screen or whatever, but it was absolutely fascinating, wasn't it? It was just exciting.
Yeah And I think that if I think about the journey that took me into marketing, and the sort of particular avenue that I've taken, which is very analytical, was that being good at coding meant that when I left university and I went to work for Accenture, my job at the time was coding and building. The first thing that I did was asked to do was this project where we had to, sounds really boring, but just for TeleWest, which is now Virgin Media, I had to write this thing that somehow organized all of the cabinets they've got around the country with their sort of nodes in, how they would be connected with all the different fibers and cables, etc. And this routine had to go through and just automatically work it out based on distances and connection type. And it was very kind of spreadsheet based as well. So I got really, 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 really good at spreadsheets and databases. And then when that sales role that I told you about at Sky was very spreadsheet based, and I could build anything in a spreadsheet that very kind of clearly and visually and simply represented performance. So that became my special kind of skill, was building spreadsheets that represented sales performance. So that went on into when I joined Now TV into the marketing approach. I was able to very easily, quickly, clearly, and simply summarize performance. And when you can see performance very, very clearly, and you can predict it, and you can make promises about what performance is going to be, and reflect back on why it was or wasn't that, and what worked and what didn't work, it creates a very disciplined approach to sales planning and results. So I think that was probably the thread that went through it all.
Yeah. And was that what you envisaged yourself doing? I mean, when you were little, did you think this is just what I want to do? This is, this is what I want to work in when I'm older?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was marketing because I didn't know what marketing was. I didn't know that it was a thing when I was young. I think I probably envisioned myself being an engineer and building things, building circuits. So, I specialized in electronics at university, and I built a hi-fi in my last year project. I loved it. And when I left university, looking back, I probably should have joined, a company like Google if it had existed at the time I left. But at the time when I left, engineering it sounds really shallow. It wasn't cool. It's not where all the fun people seemed to be. It seemed like no one respected it as much.
Right.
At the time, it was being a coder was like, well, that's not something that people really did. And then maybe a couple of years later, Google and Facebook and all that stuff taken off. It's now massively in demand and massively respected as a career. So if I'd been 5 years later, that's probably what I might have ended up doing.
And are there any particular people who you've met along the way, or longer ago, who've really influenced you in your career or in your life? Is there anyone that you want to shout out?
Yeah, I think many people that I work with influence me, even in small ways. And I remember that fact. I remember about when I was early in my career that the things that people did, the way they behaved, things they said to me, really stick with me. And I remember that because I know that the same thing will be happening when I'm working with people. I've worked with people even, for a couple of months, and they've later said to me years later, that was really, really kind of important to me, the things that you said at the time. So I always really kind of remember that. But yeah, a couple of people in the various, I've only had sort of 3 or 4 jobs really, 3 or 4 different jobs. And there are particular people in each of those that have affected me in some way. In my first job at Accenture, and a couple of the senior managers on the 2 big projects that I was on when I was there, a guy called Ross Goodall and Richard Tettleborough, they were, looking back, I don't know how old they were. They were probably quite young, at the time, probably like 29, 30 or something. But I remember thinking, these guys are just like invincible. They're always so decisive, like, because projects, and consulting, they go fast and they can go wrong and there's lots of stress. But it's like they always know what to do. They're always in control of things. And so I found that very inspiring, that you could be that decisive about stuff and just kind of whenever things got difficult, they were always there, kind of like steadying stuff and making sure it was under control. I just loved that. And then the guy who gave me my break at Now TV, a guy called Pascal Wharton, it was, quite hard on me at the time. We're still friends now, of course. And I think that, I learned a lot from him. I learned the discipline that we spoke about in terms of data, numbers, performance, etc. He was relentless. He'd always push for more. I think that was great. I need to be pushed because I'm by nature, I'm quite laid back. And so being pushed is quite helpful. So yeah, very inspiring. And then just the people that I've had on my team at Gusto for the last 5 years have been a very stable team. So they've worked for me, but the feeling of working with people that, you feel are your friends and that you see outside work and you've spent a lot of time with, means that work itself is really enjoyable, and if it wasn't enjoyable, I wouldn't really be doing it. So I'm very very influenced by those types of people as well.
I'm very taken by what you said earlier, Tom, about when you left Accenture and actually you didn't have something to go to, which is a very brave thing. I think it's an exciting thing when you leave something and you kind of don't know what you're going to. But would you say, is that one of the bravest things that you've done in your career, or is there anything else that you feel was like a really brave thing to do?
Yeah, I suppose that was kind of brave, but it was also naive as well. Thinking, I thought at the time, I've done, got this great degree, I've done all this great stuff at Accenture. I was very good and had done lots of good things, and I thought, I'll just easily like fall into a new job because I've done all this great stuff. But the thing that I learned was I had done lots of good things and I was good at lots of things. No one wants that, really. They don't want someone who's good at lots of things. They well, what is it that you're a specialist at? What's the thing that you're known for? Well, I can do, I worked on this merger. I can build databases. I've done this. No, we're not looking. We're looking for something specific. So I learned a bit of a lesson in that, actually, about managing your career and focus. When I was at Accenture, I just did, when I went from one project to the other, I didn't consider it in terms of what's going to add a new skill or what's going to build my personal brand. It was more what seems the most interesting or what's closest to London, actually, because some of the things you had to travel quite far for. So that was a bit of a mistake. But I think, bravery, I haven't taken enough risks in my career, but the ones that I did take, I'm grateful for. So the risks of trying to do something that I didn't think I could do at Now TV, and they were really scary. And those were the things that, and I like that. Someone said early on in my career, if you're not scared, you're not uncomfortable, you're not doing enough. It should always feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Don't go and do something where it feels like you know what you're doing. So yeah, going in and being scared probably for the full 4 years at Now TV actually was quite brave, because I look back now and think, wow, it's quite a stressful way to live.
I also like the fact that you were sort of hanging around the marketing team waiting to be noticed, which you said was not the best approach. For anyone sort of perhaps earlier on in their career now, how would you suggest that people do get noticed then?
I would say a couple of things. One is have something in your mind of a career plan, or even better on paper, and for that to have at least 3 different routes as well. Sometimes people find it difficult to get started by saying, here's my single line that I want to go down. So when I later got into the idea of career planning, I had 3 different options that were related, but different enough that I would sort of triple my chances of something coming up. So that was the first thing. And then secondly, it's surprising how few people just ask. Yeah. And then when you do, stuff happens. So, not that often, but it happens. I get people message me on LinkedIn saying, I would like a job this is for these reasons, I'd like to work for your company. Or I'd just like some advice on something. And people so rarely ask directly that when they do, I'm like, okay, sure. and we've hired people in that way, where people have just written to me and said, I've got this particular skill and these particular ambitions. I'd like to get involved. I was like, okay, let's have a go. So I've just honestly asked. Yeah. It's so surprising, like how many times you're going to get a response. Actually,
I know that that's advice from Emma Harris, who's one of the trainers at the Marketing Academy, and I know that we met through the Marketing Academy, and she always sort of has this theory that people should just start doing the job that they want to do. So act already like you're doing it, not sort of sitting around waiting to be asked to dance, as it were. So just get on and do it. But shifting gears a little bit, and just want to talk about marketing, because I'm curious to know what's exciting you at the moment in marketing, and maybe what's the impact on Gusto of things that are really kind of catching your eye right now.
So I get asked this question occasionally, and I always feel as though there's an expectation to say something really kind of like cutting edge. But what I guess really excites me is the stuff that works for our audience and the stuff that is going to be effective, I suppose. So, and our audience is fairly traditional, actually. So we're only just getting into TikTok and that sort of stuff, which is working quite well, actually. But as I mentioned earlier, I'm very about measurement and effectiveness. That's the thing that really excites me. And we've been looking more recently at some of the work that Les Binet has been doing on share of voice and share of search, which is in its kind of early stages, but we're actually starting to use it not just for reviewing how things have gone and why things might have happened the way they are, because we spend a lot of money on brand advertising now, so we need to understand its effectiveness. But we're starting to use it to potentially inform how we plan our brand spend in future. So, I'd love to get more data on that, and at Gusto we're using it to try and build forward-looking plans as well. So I think that's quite interesting.
I'm also still like what you said earlier about having access to that database where you can tell, all of the different ingredients and being used. So I guess you could do like a breakdown of what are the favorite ingredients around the UK and really tailor the marketing so well.
Yeah. It is interesting. And also because, I had in my early career, as I mentioned, I was a database designer and I can query databases very well. I still find myself tempted and still have occasionally dipped in there and said, oh, okay, I wonder, what it is about potatoes or something like that works. Because there was a time when, any ad that had a fried egg in it used to work really, really well for us.
So funny. But you're not actually editing the HTML yourself anymore.
No, I haven't done that for a while.
Do you think we actually, as marketers, do you think we do talk about the data as much as we should do? Or do you think, I mean, you must sort of speak to different people and speak on panels and things. I always feel like there should be more around the data.
Yeah. I mean, because I've been sort of so deeply involved in it for a while, I feel like it feels natural to me, and it feels natural to Gusto, because that's just how we are. And so when I do speak to people and say what I think are relatively straightforward things, and people go, "Oh wow, that's different," I'm kind of surprised. So I get the sense that there should be more on it, but I haven't been like inside many other companies, so it's hard to compare. But from people that I meet, interview, etc., there could definitely be more focus. Another thing that goes alongside that, though, because I've been so involved in data, is I sometimes want to spend more time with the customers, because that's the other side of marketing. There's no perfect way of doing anything, and whilst we do spend a lot of time noses down in spreadsheets and databases, I'm kind of inspired by other brands where they're out of the office, they're in customers' homes.
Mm-hmm.
You hear stories about CMOs and CEOs who are walking the floor of their stores like once a week, and just chatting to members of the public. I'd love to do more of that. I don't do enough of it. Especially with the pandemic, you get a little bit of Zoom into people's houses, but before the pandemic, some of the most interesting things that we did were to go and spend an afternoon in a customer's house, nosing around their fridge, talking to them about how they actually use it. It just learns so much from that the data augments but doesn't replace.
Well, I predict that getting more involved on TikTok will really give you that insight, actually, because it's being used. I mean, the way that we use it for brands, it's so cool because you just get so connected to the community. And I think, that's, it does come back to that. Now, obviously, I'm always going to be a bit biased about it being about, genuine human connections with consumers and social media. But I think TikTok is a great way to kind of get to know your customers. So I'm feeling good for you right now on that journey.
Yeah. I mean, even seeing some of the UGC stuff that people are doing, huge like engagement, and just people cooking and just throwing some ingredients in. But people, that's the other thing about working for Gusto, is that customers love food, and it's so great when you're selling a product that people just love talking about, love sharing, love enjoying eating, all that sort of stuff. It's very fulfilling as a marketer to have that feedback from people.
Yeah, that's wonderful. What have you been most proud of in your career so far, or outside of your career, if you prefer?
I mentioned earlier that I become very aware of the impact that I have on others, people have on each other and relationships. And that's kind of been my philosophy about growing teams and leadership, is remembering the impact that I'm going to have on people. And what drives me is seeing other people be successful and helping other people be successful, because that in turn helps the business and so on. So I'm pretty proud of the team that I've grown at Gusto. It's amazing when you join a company and it's in a tiny little office, if you can call it that, underneath a block of flats, and it's just all these kind of young faces looking at you, looking for leadership, and you can come in and you can see people grow, and you can hire the team, and look around now and see all the people that are there. I've remember meeting every one of them individually to interview them, and seeing them go on and do things that either at Gusto or beyond Gusto, which they couldn't have probably imagined 5 years ago when they joined. I'm really, really proud of the impact that I'm able to have on people.
That's wonderful. We're going to switch gears a little bit now, and we've come to the bit of the podcast where we get a bit more personal and do the equivalent of nose around your fridge. So let's start with, what's your idea of a perfect weekend? Any guilty pleasures?
Oh, I'd love to go away more. The last couple of years have not been away as much, but a perfect weekend for me would be somewhere warm actually, not hot. That's the wrong word because hot is too much sometimes. I've
Mhm.
discovered, but somewhere warm. And of the days of the weekend, I'd love to spend one day just relaxing on the beach or by the pool, and then the other day with some balance because I'm quite restless.
Mhm.
So the other day, packed from 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. exploring, doing things, walking, climbing, being active in some way. So a good balance of those two things. And I don't think I have any guilty pleasures except looking at myself. Maybe one, which is TikTok.
It's a new guilty pleasure.
Yeah, it is designed because I started using it a while back to understand it for marketing reasons, but then it's just designed in such a way to draw you in, isn't it? And so when I'm sitting by the pool, I should be reading. Really, I should be reading a book about marketing history or something. But you just think, oh, just a quick look, and then you're there for half an hour. It's ridiculously addictive, isn't it? And you just like smoking or something, you know that you need to stop and put limits on it. But what they've designed to keep you engaged is pretty
That's
astounding.
very well done. What advice would you give to your teenage self?
We've spoken about it a little in the last half an hour, but take more risks. I think practice taking risks, practice doing things that you're going to fail at. I didn't fail at enough things, which you could look at. Oh, well, that's great, but I in retrospect look back and think, well, that means I didn't push things far enough, because I was probably a bit afraid of failure. So I would encourage myself to fail in small ways and start building the muscle of failure.
Yeah.
I've seen something, you might have seen it as well, about a person who says go in and for 10 days in a row, ask for a discount at Starbucks. Not because you actually want a discount, but just to get used to the feeling of being knocked back and saying, no. But just doing things like that and failing more, I would want to do. Not compare myself to other people. It's one of those things that you kind of get more used to as you get older, saying, when you're young, and you still see it now, and people saying, oh, my friend has done this and been successful at that, and I see this person there, they're like 23 and they're running their own company. It makes you feel a bit anxious, really, and a bit, but there's no rush, really, unless you want there to be a rush. And so be comfortable with your own pace, I would say.
And when you're not eating gusto meals, what's one of your go-to restaurants?
I like variety. I like going to lots of different restaurants, and I have done. There was one that I've probably been to maybe 20 times, which is strange for me, but it's closed down now. But it was a dim sum restaurant in near Oxford Street. But dim sum, I used to go to loads and loads and loads. I love dim sum. I love lots of different types of world cuisine. But if I was going to name one, a little shout out for South London, there's a restaurant called Babur in Honor Oak, which is a tiny little kind of Indian restaurant, which is just incredible, absolutely incredible. You just get blown away every time I go there. They've got this tent or sort of marquee in the back, which you go through, and it's really lovely decoration. The service is amazing. Babur in South London, I'd recommend
That sounds lovely. I'll be adding that to my list. Do you have any leaders that really inspire you? Any books that you've read of different leaders, or someone that you just be love to sort of get stuck in a lift with, or something?
I tend to be inspired by sports people, actually. And they're not all leaders, they're not all team captains. Some of them are individuals, so athletes and so on. But what I find inspiring about them is the self-discipline. I'm lucky enough to be quite successful in work. I'm actually not that. I haven't got great self-discipline. And it's something I work on. So there's just seeing people who can focus on something so single-minded and specific. Jessica Ennis-Hill, the sort of athlete who won gold at the Olympics a while back. I met her, face to face a few years ago. It's just amazing. You can just see even when she was sitting still, just the focus radiating out of her. I found that kind of way of being very inspiring. I also, if I was stuck in a lift with someone like that, I'd love to know how they balance that selfishness, for want of a better word, with their interpersonal relationships. But if I was going to pick one person to be stuck in a lift with, it's going to sound like a funny one, but Arnold Schwarzenegger, actually, because I grew up watching his movies, and you just think, oh, he's a guy who just says a couple of lines in movies, but he was a fascinating guy, and all of that stuff that you saw on screen was the product of lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of hard work in the background to get him to that place. and I'm fascinated by people who have lived very full lives and got loads and loads of stories of and been everywhere, and by having such a full life and meeting lots of people, you learn so much stuff. And I'd love to kind of hear some of his stories in a lift.
Yeah, I bet he's got a few to tell. If we could give you an extra hour each day, what would you do with it? I mean, and TikTok's a perfectly acceptable answer.
No. It's funny because saying I could have an extra hour in a day suggests that I'm probably gainfully filling the existing ones and I need this extra, which is not true at all. I might waste that extra hour. You should give it to somebody else. So what would I do with it? I think that I would spend more time to myself, really. So although I am quite restless and I do try to fill hours with things and tasks, and there's always one more piece of admin to do, or there's a bit more work, or there's something, and I don't think I really have enough time just doing nothing in a way, but doing nothing in a mindful sense, in a way of slowing down. So not wasteful, but using it to really quieten and not look at the phone and so on. So I'd love to spend that hour being present in myself and my own mind, as opposed to in other just distractions and tasks, etc. I definitely set it aside to be quiet.
That's a really good answer. How would your friends describe you?
Caring, somewhat self-interested, sadly, but in a positive way, I suppose, or in a way, in an accepting way. So what they mean by that is that and this is linked back to the fact that I don't look for praise.
Yeah.
So that means that I inadvertently don't give it as much.
Right.
And I don't sort of I don't consider. Well, I didn't used to, at least anyway. And I more actively think about it, having reflected on it. I'm more likely to forget someone's birthday than most people. So that's what I mean by the self-interested. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that that's just how he is sometimes. But he's working on it. They would say that I'm quite competitive as well. I've always been competitive growing up, competitive with my friends as well. But again, in a good sort of balanced way that we can later laugh at from our childhoods. And quite active as well. So quite restless. Doesn't like to kind of sit in one place for too long.
And I'm on a bit of a personal mission to get more karaoke into the marketing industry. Have you got a karaoke go-to song? Do you even like karaoke?
I do like karaoke. I'm an average singer, middling, not even that great. But so I do like karaoke, and when I do karaoke, I realize it's not meant to be about you. So I love doing songs that are for me, and just I can be in my little element and sing. I don't know, John Legend, All of Me is one of my favorites.
Lovely.
But that's not what people want at karaoke. They want the sing-alongs. So probably Mr. Brightside by the Killers or something like that.
Fantastic.
Great choice.
Because you don't want to kill the mood with it all going quiet and you say, no, listen, everybody shush, listen to me.
Yeah. Indulgent karaoke. I sing in a pop choir, and when we get together and do karaoke, we do indulgent karaoke, and then there is the crowd pleasing karaoke, which you have to. I totally agree with you there. Now, is there anything we're coming to the end now? So, is there anything that we haven't asked that we really should have asked you, or I'd like to sort of give you the platform for any closing thoughts?
We touched on it briefly earlier, but there was something that happened when I was at Now TV that has really made me consider that balance of art and science in marketing. And for all the data talk and my sort of analytical background and so on, one of the tasks that I was given was to prove, I think that was the word, how our advertising money on brand especially worked. And you had to prove it. You've got to put a number on it. And I spent maybe 10 months or something working on this, and just concluded you can't prove. We have to accept that there are lots of unknowns, that consumers are irrational, and it's all models that kind of roughly describe how things might work. Actually, it was in one of the books that I read at the time, It said, it was a chapter called How Advertising Might Work. And it went on and said like 4 different ways that it might work, not how it does work, but how it might work. No, there is no way that it works perfectly. It's just people and, people's minds changing a little bit and using heuristics to kind of make split decisions. It said split second decisions. It's all very irrational. And just being able to step back and say, you know what, for this particular thing, we're going to go with our gut, or we're going to use intuition. And intuition isn't really just guessing. It's basically the combined years of experience of people who've seen lots of things happen in the past. They don't know why a particular course or a particular creative or a particular tactic is going to work, but they just got a feeling that it is. And it's not just from your belly. It's because you have seen all this stuff in some way before and you're connecting the dots. And so, yeah, whilst data is really important and being very analytical in your approach is important, taking a few risks in the way that you approach your campaigns is essential as well.
You've been listening to Genuine Humans, brought to you by The Social Element. If you loved what you heard, remember to subscribe, or you can find out more at www.thesocialelement.agency.